So, so this is me. As Nicholas said, I actually spent most of my career, so the past 10 years or so, in the creative agency world. And it's great to be back and part of that here in London. What's interesting, though, is I spent the past year, so I came over to London about 5 months ago, in the Silicon Valley, at Facebook, at their headquarters in Palo Alto at the time. We're now in Menlo Park. So what I thought I'd do is I'd kind of frame some of the passion and some of the creativity that I've seen in Silicon Valley and I know is so important to agencies, and talk about how we've internalized that at Facebook. But before I do that, I kind of want to set the stage to say a lot of what I'm going to talk about isn't something that you guys don't already know. So coming from that creative agency background, it's stuff that you guys do every day, right? Most of the time you see it during a new business pitch. So it's 3 a.m. the night before, this great idea comes out, right? And part of this brainstorm or prep session, it's completely different than the idea that you planned 2 days before. And by lunchtime the next day, you're presenting that flushed out, semi-flushed out idea to the client. It's no different than that, but what this is all about, and what we've done at Facebook, and I think we do pretty well, is we capture that magic that happens at that 3 a.m. kind of session, and that's delivered to clients the next day, and we bring that to life every day in everything we do. So this is actually my map on Facebook, and I realized I haven't checked in as much as I should across Silicon Valley. But anyways, this is Silicon Valley. And the first thing that I want to talk about is something that Silicon Valley does really well. They move fast. Everyone there moves fast. There's ideas brewing left and right. Everyone has an idea that you meet, and they move fast to bring it to life before somebody else does. Now at Facebook, we have posters up around the headquarters, so I'm sure when you guys went down there you saw some of these. In fact, you referenced a couple of these in your talk, Jason and Mark did. So these posters are around Facebook, and they're kind of what I'm going to talk to today. We've taken the idea of move fast in Silicon Valley, and we say move fast and break things. Now, literally, it's not like a tornado coming in. We're not saying move fast and literally break things as you do it. We're not trying to create broken products. That's not really what this means. What move fast and break things really means is you have to move fast, and you have to be okay with giving up something good in a quest for something great. That's what I mean by break things. So let's take a look at an example of how that's kind of come to life at Facebook. This is the first Facebook, called The Facebook still, as you can see. And so this was the first site we created. College students were on it. It was actually a really good site. We had some great reach amongst the universities, and you know, it was useful. I could say where I'm from, I could say what school I went to, talk about some of my interests, some of the music I like maybe, and it was good. But it was really hard to discover stuff. So if I wanted to find out what my friends were changing, what maybe new music they were into, I literally had to go to every profile, refresh it, and like scout out what might have changed. That's not good. And so fast forward to today, where we have Newsfeed. We launched Newsfeed, and it was actually a mess. People protested it. They created sites. There were like 1 million people or something that created this site, like go back to this old Facebook. But if you look at Facebook today, Newsfeed is at the core of everything that we do. How many of you actually go to Facebook and immediately go somewhere else besides Newsfeed? Nobody, right? You have to go there to see what your family's up to, friends are up to, colleagues, brands, what's going on. This is like your personal newspaper of sorts. And so the idea here is when we say move fast and break things, we had to move fast, but we had to say it's okay to give up something good, the old Facebook, to go for something much better, the new Facebook with Newsfeed. The second thing that Silicon Valley does really well, and this seems obvious, but it's having that startup mentality. Everyone's an entrepreneur. So there's people on my team back in the US, and they're like, I don't know, 25, and they've already tried to start 2 companies, and like, you know, or they're like engineers and they're coding stuff in their spare time. I don't know, that's not me. But the idea is it's that mentality. Everything that they do has a startup mentality. And the innovation that that drives is pretty impressive. So at Facebook, the poster that I think brings that to kind of life is fail harder. And you guys mentioned this one, Mark and Jason. So fail harder is up around the walls at Facebook. And it literally doesn't mean to fail. Obviously, we're in this for success. But what it means is figure out what's not working, accept that you could fail to get onto the path of success much faster, much quicker. Right? There's many examples of this internally. So we're trying to create products that are really, really good for the people on the site. And so many of those probably don't see the light of day. And so could you imagine spending a ton of time working on a product? You realize it's not the right product and it goes nowhere. It's kind of failing. But you know what? It's okay. It's okay to fail. And it's something that I think, you know, in the creative agency world, so coming from that, I think like, at times, we say it's okay. We said it's okay, I should say. But at the end of the day, it wasn't okay, right? If you didn't come up with the right thing right on time, then you're like, shit, we're behind, and what do we do now? But actually, it's okay to fail. And if you don't fail, and if you don't identify what's not right, you can't get to that path of success faster. And that's what fail harder means. I mean, if you go outside the technology world, Richard Branson's done this really well, right? If he internalizes this probably more than anyone that I could think of, and look at his success because of it. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about is this idea in the Valley, how you can create, you can iterate, and you can test. And then you create, and then you iterate, and then you test again. And that's something that just keeps going, this vicious cycle almost. But it's something that's really powerful, and it's something that I think we could bring to the community here in London. At Facebook, the poster that's up on the walls that I think brings this to life for us is done is better than perfect. That's pretty powerful. I actually think it's pretty powerful for the work that all of you do, right? Done is better than perfect often. And I think the way to kind of give you an example of this is the hacker culture that you guys also mentioned. So the hacker culture, this is actually our courtyard in our new campus in Menlo Park, and it says hack, and it's actually the way of thinking at Facebook. So when I say hack, it's not this idea of like, I'm going to hack into a network and do illegal things. It's actually this mentality of saying, look, done is better than perfect. Let's figure it out. Let's think of new ways to do stuff. It's something that, again, you guys, this is something that I think you guys do well, but what's different about hacking than maybe some of the brainstorming sessions that traditionally have happened in companies is that a hack is actually, or a hackathon, which are the events that we have, are actually times when you have to work on something that you don't normally work on, right? So you go in at like 6 o'clock at night, you meet with let's say this room was going to hack, we get together, somebody kicks it off, and you go and you work on something that you don't normally work on. So to give you an idea of that, the last hack I worked on was for an automotive company, and so the hack was actually about in-car technology and how we can make everything about the car social. Now, I couldn't tell you the difference between like car A and car B. I'm not a technologist, but that's what I worked on. And the ideas that you get when you put somebody in that situation that's doing something they don't normally do, that's not necessarily working against a specific brief, let's say, that they traditionally work on, is really, really powerful. Here's an example. So this is a room at Facebook, and this is at our old office. And you can see there's six computers set up there. There were 6 engineers, and we were growing really fast, and we were out of space, which is why we moved. We needed to fit another 6 or 10 engineers in here, and so there were teams like for, I don't know, a week or two talking about how do we do this, where do we move people, how can we be innovative in this space. And what happened was we had this hackathon, and these engineers who are normally writing code got together and overnight did this. So it wasn't perfect in the morning, but this is the concept they came up with. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think of like going up. I only thought of like, how do we use the space on the bottom? Now, these are engineers that write code. They somehow built this and concocted it together and came up with this idea of being innovative in the space. So it's a really cool way of something they don't normally work on coming to life as part of a hack. There's two actually really big things that I think we've done that have started from a hack. So Facebook chat started from a hack. Again, people who wouldn't normally work on that came up with Facebook chat. And the biggest one is the like button. So the like button today has 3.2 billion likes and comments happening every day on Facebook globally. The idea of the like started in a hack. Like, that's pretty, to me, I'm like, wow, that's pretty insane that something like that could come out of it. And that's the kind of thing that I think we can bring to the community here in London, something that we just need to foster within the agency community. The next one, the next thing that Silicon Valley does really well is they build, they ship it, they build more. They build, they ship it, they build more, and that, again, another cycle that just keeps going. So at Facebook, there's this phrase that Mark always uses, and he says it's the journey is 1% finished. People have it on their computers. There's posters up around the office. And this is actually a really interesting mentality to have. Because I think when you get to the point of almost being done with something, like think of it, right? You're working on something, weeks past, maybe even a month. You get to the end of that and you're like, oh, awesome, I'm done. The problem with that is as soon as you say, ah, you go to this level of like not being under the gun, not thinking I'm only 1% finished, not thinking I need to iterate, not thinking I need to build. And that's not a great place to be at. I think there's a way to feel and reward satisfaction and completion, but understand that there's always more to do, and you're only 1% done in a lot of the things that you're doing. So photos are it's a really interesting piece of Facebook. So photos, when we introduced them in 2005, was really interesting. There were some really great competitors out there in the space. They were doing things like you could edit, you could crop, you could change color, and all that good stuff. And we had no photos product. So we wanted to enter the market, and we thought of it in an interesting way. And I'll show you a quick video that brings that to life.
There were 20 great photos products around in 2005 that had millions of dollars in cash, that had hundreds of features. And here we came along with a handful of people in a month and a half and built a product that boiled down and removed all of those features, except for one thing, which was tagging it, so that we organized the photos on the web around people, and it completely changed the experience. That was just like that.
So we launched Photos. We quickly became the #1 photo sharing site on the web. But the photos were actually low res, small, you couldn't edit them, no cropping, no color correction, but you could tag it and they had people at the core. Now, we could have said, that's great, we have photos, they're hugely successful, done, let's move on to something else. But fast forward to today, here's back to my dog. Fast forward to today, and our photos product actually now, so a month ago, we actually made it high def, bigger, you can expand them to the screen, you have the social context. We actually iterated photos and made them better and better and better. With people still at the core, but understanding that our effort in photos was only 1% done. That's kind of what I mean. There's always room to iterate, and we could have left this in one place, and it would have been fine. But again, let's try to make it better, and let's try to get to something great. Here are some other posters. So these are other posters that I'm not going to all focus on that are up around Facebook. You know, you see things like "Fortune favors the bold." You see things like, "Is this a technology company?" "The foolish wait." These are the ways of thinking. These are the ways of thinking at Facebook, and I think they're ways that we could actually bring to life in the community that we all represent here in London. They're actually not that complicated, and they're actually things that are happening already in almost every agency here in London. But how do you embrace that and bring that to life every day? And that's kind of my bigger question. So the one I'm going to end on is my favorite one, and it's, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And I think it actually sums up everything that we've talked about, or that I've talked about today. I think that it's, again, a way to approach innovation here. It says it's okay to fail, It says, remember, you're only 1% done. It says that you should just go and do it and try it. Done is better than perfect, right? This all, to me, brings that to life. And if we could instill that and reinforce that, I think we'd be in a really, really solid place to drive the innovation that we want here in London. Now, it may sound idealistic, and having a founder and a CEO in his 20s makes this probably much easier. But the reality is that I think we all learn to lose that over time. I mean, I know if I look at, like, you know, just my own progression, I think over time you start to kind of back away from this, right? It was okay when you were in your early 20s. Now 30, 40, 50, now you're like, I don't know. I don't know about this. I have to question this. You know what? If we keep that mentality, that's what's going to help drive innovation, and that's what's going to empower the people that we all work with to drive innovation. So I'm going to leave you with a video that actually brings to life kind of all of these concepts that I talked about in the Valley, but shows you how we've internalized them at Facebook to come up with some products. And I think you'll see what I mean when I talk about these posters really being the way of life at Facebook.
One of our core values is to move fast, so that's an absolute part of our culture. You know, ideas are one thing, but actually going and building it is something else.
When you build a product here, you often don't know what it's going to turn into. The idea of the Facebook platform, I think, was kind of brewing in nature, so I can't really say that any one of us can take complete credit for it.
Facebook platform is the way that any software developer in the world can create an application or website using the core things that make Facebook so great.
We were kind of given some freedom to experiment with this thing, and there wasn't a lot of pressure that it had to be a success.
You know, the platform team started out, you know, a pretty small team, maybe 5 engineers or so.
It was a really exciting time because there were no examples in the industry. There was nothing that we could follow and no book we could read.
I stole a server from the feed pool. It was called Feed009, was the first thing to run the Facebook platform. Built a really simple app by which there's you and then there's lines to all the people you know. And it was hosted outside, and I said, okay, check this out, isn't this great? People can create things outside of Facebook using our data. This is like the first day that this is happening.
We as the platform team knew this was a big idea, but we didn't really appreciate how fast it was going to take off.
We had a whole launch event planned out up in San Francisco.
It was actually pretty overwhelming, and we had 800 to 1,000 people coming.
And we had this idea that we would then go and launch the entire product that night from the city, in hotels.
It was kind of crazy how we were actually coding, you know, at the actual event where we were launching the product.
With this evolution of Facebook platform, any developer worldwide is going to be able to build full applications on top of the social graph inside of the Facebook framework.
We flipped the switch that night.
Something amazing happened. By the next morning, we had so much traffic and so many people were interested in what was going on that, you know, we basically had to figure out how to scale faster than we ever had before.
I remember getting a text message the next day and, you know, iLike has 50,000 users. I was like, 50,000 in, you know, just a few hours? That's incredible.
They were literally driving around the San Francisco Bay with a U-Haul truck, begging and asking people for servers that they might be able to use to handle all the growth.
You know, now they've got millions of users on a monthly basis.
Everyone just went absolutely freaking nuts. They just went crazy for this thing.
The beauty of the Facebook platform on CNN was not only could you see what everyone else was saying about the inauguration, but you could see what your friends were saying. It was far more exciting and interactive than just sitting in front of the television.
There were 8,500 status updates in the first minute of Obama's speech, and by the end of the day, there were over 1 million. Within just 2 to 3 weeks, we've managed to code this entire thing from scratch, and it turned out to be the biggest live streaming event in internet history.
Facebook prioritizes moving fast in a way that other companies probably don't feel like they can get away with.
A lot of the success of Facebook wasn't that they came up with this great idea and had the master plan worked out. It was really that they just weren't afraid to try stuff out, and they tried stuff out quicker and better than the competitors.
We don't have warehouses and underground dungeons of thousands of engineers doing this thing. You and 200 engineers are building something that thousands of people at these bigger companies just can't.
So you can see the power of empowering people, of not being afraid, and of moving fast. and breaking things. I couldn't be prouder to be here in London, and thank all of you for having me today.